What's up, everybody? I'm pretty tired. Welcome back to more CSGO news. A pretty random video out there. That's going to be me power ranking these 10 teams on screen for all of you, because all 10 of these teams have actually made roster changes of some sort ever since, of course, this year being 2019 in the past few months. And one of these teams has actually made changes a bit farther back. But I wanted to power rank for all of you the teams that have actually made changes, that being those 10 teams who have made some pretty big changes themselves, and rank them in order from worst to best. So I hope you guys all enjoy. I'll be ranking them number 10 all the way to number 1. If you guys want to do me a favor, please do me a favor, leave a comment down below. I read every single one, and you guys can rank your worst to best trades from number 10 to number 1 in the comment section, and that way we can see what you guys think based off, compared to what I think as well. But usually what I think doesn't matter. So let's do it. Let's be cranky. Let's dish out some hate. Let's dish out some nice things, and we'll see what happens. Number 10 on the list, easily, that being Gambit. I don't know if it's Gambit Gaming or Gambit Esports, but I really don't care because they've fallen off the face of the earth ever since 2017. Remember when they won the major, guys? Well, only 2 remaining members from that roster, that being, of course, from PGL Krakow, their major victory there, and that 2 players is going to be Mo alongside Doja. I have no clue why Doja is still on the roster. It's pretty shocking to me, but he's obviously become the face of the organization, and that's probably why they somehow, for some reason, thought it was a good idea a couple weeks ago, I think it might have been over a month ago now actually, to drop Bondic and drop Blade. Now, I'm not going to say this was 2 amazing players. I think Blade is probably better off suited as a CIS coach out there, but along with that, Bondic was certainly not their best player. He was not a very good player on the team, but he was not their worst player. And typically when you look at rosters, who they try and replace, it's their worst player. So that's why they're numbered the 10 on the list. I don't understand what you're doing, why you're keeping your worst player, but also on top of that, you're getting rid of one of the players I found that was definitely probably a middle of the pack player. So I understand Blade, okay? I'll give you guys that one. And Bondic has found a new home and win strike, which I think proves to people out there he is worth something, because he has now found a team that definitely has a higher chance to continue to make majors in the future as compared to this Gambit roster. So good for you, Bondic. You've gotten off this roster, and as why they're number 10, because I have no idea what they're trying to do with the roster. I don't appreciate the drops they've made so far, although you can't really argue with one of them. So I'm very curious who their 5th player will be, but until they announce their 5th player, this team is number 10 on my list. Number 9 is going to be Virtus Pro, because just like Gambit, I just don't know what this roster can do, especially I've talked about this in the past, guys. The Polish scene right now is so undersaturated with players, that of course being across their 3 best teams, who are all pretty middle of the pack teams in terms of playing against each other. They're all fairly competitive and probably close to the same rank. Kingwin, AGO, and of course Virtus Pro as well. Virtus Pro most recently have dropped Tao from the roster. If you guys do know, he was actually signed just around 3 months ago. It was a pretty big signing. They pretty much had stolen him away from AGO as a rising man himself, and it was a big move for Virtus Pro to make. Just not working out. So now Snacks is actually back in the IGL role. They as well are an unfinished roster, and why they're number 9 on the list as well, because you drop this roster yet again to build around Mihu and Snatchy, which I still have faith in. You of course bring back Bialy eventually, bring back Snacks eventually. Now you have Snacks back in the IGL role, so we'll see what we get here. And then very lastly, for a 5th player, I just don't know who there is available right now besides Reitz. And again, it seems like Virtus Pro does not have the money they did before. They're not taking the risks they did before. They're signing players for very short and stringent amounts of time. This Virtus Pro roster easily number 9 on my list. And don't even get me started. The very last number on the list I think was going to be a sketchy roster trade and roster swap. Everything above this, number 7 and forward, I think is going to be a general improvement for rosters out there. But the giant mystery ball on this list has to be number 8, being Cloud9, guys. And we all know the moves they have made so far. Still, I want to say Rush. I hope he comes back. We all know the high potential player he is, the world-class player he can be if he does show up. He's just been so utterly inconsistent. You don't know what to expect about keeping him on the roster. You keep Automatic, who is automatically the most consistent player and best player on the team itself. He will retain the opping role, so we think, going forward. Along with that, of course, we have Golden, who's coming back from an illness, who we don't really know the future of, and if he's going to stay or actually go for a better Swedish offer, we have no idea. He comes back to a roster that's pretty much brand new from when he first joined Cloud9 to IGL, so we'll see what he can actually do with his 2 newest members, that being Vice, who's currently on trial, a player that many of us don't know what to expect from really, so going to see how he does. And then very lastly, Cajun from OpTic Gaming, I think a very consistent rifler himself and one of their better players over at OpTic, a very experienced player as well to pull in, but you pull in all these different figures from different teams out there, and it certainly will take months to actually mesh this team together. And that being said, can Cloud9 for once actually retain a player player, if not a European player for more than 3 to 4 months? That is the ultimate question. Can this roster finally for Cloud9 go long-term enough where they actually see success? To me is what worries me, and that's why they're number 8 on my list. Number 7 comes in with NRG, you know? Some people say energy, some people say NRG, and they have acquired Tarek. Of course, I think, again, on paper, what we've seen so far, Tarek for Fugly has to be an immediate improvement. Now, I mean, no dishes of hate, okay? I like Fugly. I think it's really great to see. We'll talk about him later in the list, okay? He's going to be a linchpin for the team that he has joined, higher on this list as well. But I think on paper, it's hard to deny the potential that Tarek has shown in the past, especially throughout earlier 2018 as well. So if he can actually stay on this roster and see a meshing as well, we have seen NRG a very, very limited amount of time with Tarek thus far. On paper, though, this has to be a pretty decent improvement. Just for a lack of what we've seen so far from NRG is why they're number 7 on my list. But still, Breeze, I call him Brezzy, alongside Cirque are 2 players I am so high on. I don't do drugs, but they're number 7 on my list. OpTic Gaming is the single most controversial team on this list. Now, they're number 6 because I think there's a lot of people out there who probably think this is going to be a big move in the right direction, or it's going to be a similar stagnant OpTic Gaming. If you guys don't know, 2 pretty big counterpoints to what this team has done to actually, the reason probably why they're middle of the pack for my list itself, you keep your best player in config. Congratulations. You kick your worst player, or, you know, bench your most, I guess, your least indecisive player, your worst player in Snappy, all right? He was an underwhelming player. I wish him the best of luck in the future. You keep your best player, you get rid of your worst player. That's a great move. But on top of that, you also get rid of one of your most consistent riflers in Cajun B, and you keep your next worst player that's been performing recently and has not performed well ever since joining OpTic in Refrez. So can you keep up with me, guys, right? Why am I confused? You keep your best player, you get rid of your worst player, then you get rid of one of your better players and keep your next worst player. It's confusing, right? So on paper, you think they're making somewhat of a right directional move here. It's going to be really cool to see how they do in the future. I think the linchpin, the turning point of all of this to kind of course, we had a counterpoint. They did a really good thing. They did a really bad thing, in my opinion. And now, very lastly, the turning point of this OpTic Gaming roster is how much potential do you think MSL and Nico have? So OpTic Gaming, I have high hopes, especially compared to their former roster. They can't really perform much less than their former roster did, and so that's why they're number 6 on the list. I think this OpTic does improve, but they still have a lot to prove, in my opinion. Whoa, what are you doing? No. Vitality, number 5 on my list, guys. This one really confuses me. Going to be really reminiscent of my number 1 team as well, the changes they made. I'm not really sure how they've improved, but you can't really argue with the results, right? Ever since Alex joining and, of course, the benching of Happy, apparently some hole in the team that Alex certainly could fill. He's not lighting up scoreboards. I'm not going to deny that, but the results themselves compared to former Vitality and new Vitality, their major run, they're so far run in EU Mountain Dew League doing very well. The We Play Lock and Load tournament, they almost qualified for Starletter Season 7. They were 1 match away or 1 series away from doing so. They have vastly improved, and I think it does obviously help that Zai will clear carry. NBK has been completely reformed over the past 4 to 5 months, and I cannot give him enough credit for doing so. I can't argue results-wise. I don't know what void he filled in this team, but Vitality is number 5 on my list. Keep doing what you're doing. Mousesports, number 4 on the list, and I think of all the teams out here, probably the most confusing to actually rate on this list, because I know that a fan favorite team for sure. When I asked you guys on Twitter what you thought the best team trades have been so far, a lot of you guys said Mousesports, and right off the bat, I think I would have debated that more if we have seen, a little bit more play out of them itself. It's a very risky pickup, in my opinion. Of course, you get one of the world's best IGLs, Kerrigan, a great pickup there for sure, so I can't really argue with that. You keep, retain one of the best hybrid players in the world as well in Chris J. Can't argue that. My only argument against the entire team so far is that I think the linchpin of this team, the one potential of this team to actually rise up, is going to fall on the shoulders of Frozen and Rops. How hard can they frag? My one complaint would be probably Woxic. You lose a world-class opper on Oscar, and then of course you pick up Woxic, he's a star-studded talent who has very, very high highs, and I've said to you guys before, very, very low lows as well. Either he shows up or he doesn't, in my opinion. You guys can certainly argue with that, and maybe you could win that argument as well. I think Woxic is definitely the waning factor on the team so far. Along with them, though, Frozen has definitely fit his role, so that's why they're so high on my list right now. From what I've seen from them, they have certainly had their hard times on both CT and GT sides. They've had some plays that have been like, okay, they are definitely a new team out there. But what I've seen so far from Frozen has impressed me subpar to none. He has taken a taste of the tier 1 scene, and he has competed heavily with this roster so far, and I'm so excited. So it's really hard to argue that they've not made vast improvements so far. And on paper, I know I've been saying it way too much, you have Rops, you have Frozen who's hanging in there, you have Kerrigan, one of the best IGLs, and along with that, you have Chris J, who's a very well-known talent. To me, the only possible weak link here we've seen so far, I guess, would be Kerrigan, his fragging power, but alongside that, Woxic, can he have those high highs? Can he show up more frequently? And so for me right now, at least what we've seen so far, Mousesports is competing, but can they compete at the level they once were is a completely new realm. So they're number 4 on my list, but they're definitely a team out there that people are overhyping for their changes, or they're also underselling them. So there's definitely people on both sides of the Mousesports argument right now, in my opinion. Number 3 on the list, I guarantee you guys, if HellRaisers actually got Sunny, I guarantee you guys 100% they'd be number 1 on my list. They would not even be close. If they would have gotten Sunny, I think they would have been the number 1 successful team in getting these trades so far. I also want to preface by saying, Angel, if you are out there, man, much props to you. I believe he is one of the longest single standing players out there to stay with a single team. That, of course, being HellRaisers. He is still there, guys. He is still there. It's pretty crazy to see. Alongside that, I'm very excited to see Issa and Hobbit with this team because I have not got the chance to watch them too much. And you pick up a world class, one of the best oppers in the world for borderline free with no buyout, that being Oscar. And you also now acquire Lowell, who I will say, this is going to be a weird one to actually assess. I think Lowell can fit the roles. He's played with Oscar before, so he can fit this team, I think. I don't think they need a star-studded, high-fragging player out there, and that's why they went for a Lowell, or they got a Lowell instead from Movistar Riders. I will say, though, it's hard to pick a standout best player for that Movistar roster because they've had a sway of results and a sway of bad results as well. I think Lowell coming back here, I think he saw potential for this roster, at least a greater potential than he did with Movistar, which is not saying much because I don't see where they're going with that Spanish roster, but still, I think overall an improvement for this team. I think Oscar's a very good improvement, and yeah, we'll see how they improve so far. They're number 3 on my list. If they would have got Sunny, definitely number 1, but I think overall this roster has certainly improved. We'll just see how Lowell fits in. Envy for me on this list is going to be the easiest to actually argue for. That being number 2 on the list, of course, and with their new changes, Fugly, Android, and Sabam now join the roster. And I think alongside that, when you look at their past results, it's hard to argue that this could not be an improvement of the roster, similar to the OpTic situation, right, with a team that had not performed too well results-wise. And I think on paper, some good improvements. This being Envy, of course, they've dropped Drone and Cutler and now added these 3 new players as well because they had Kerrigan to stand in for that major qualifier run. They almost made it to the major qualifier, which I think with that old roster was pretty freaking crazy as well. And so with this new and improved roster, I do expect a major contending team and a team who can actually take North American titles. Sam, a young up-and-comer you guys know about, he's popped off at his first LAN event or LANs events, I think maybe 2 qualifiers as well. He's done very well in. So a very, very potential player out there. Of course, we have yet to see how he's going to perform with the roster, but I think a young, fresh face out there has proven himself to be capable of playing with the big boys. Along with that, Android as well, a player who never should have been put off of the Complexity roster. He was going to get snagged by someone a long time, in the North American scene, no matter what. He has now been snagged up by Envy. I think a great pickup as well. And then you got Fugly. So I think overall with this roster, what comes down to is the IGL, who can take the reins and actually unlock this team and mesh the team together as well. And so for me, though, on paper, this has to be one of the biggest improvements we saw for a roster out there. And very lastly, number 1 on my list, and going to be very surprising for all of you, probably not going to be surprising for any of you guys, this is going to be a roster change that actually stems back to, well, kind of mid to late 2018. So one of the biggest roster changes, but also on top of that, one of the lengthier roster changes, which actually hasn't been pretty recent. So I'm sorry, I had to mention, though, that being Renegades, guys. They have now proven to me, because I have doubted these guys time and time again. If you guys have been watching Starladder as well, they've swept Tyloo, they beat FaZe and MIBR. These guys have now proven to me that somehow Liaz and Gratisfaction have filled the void, just like Vitality and Alex. I don't know what they did. These are not players that are going to flash out the scoreboard too often. They're not going to light up the kills or the frags, but they have filled a void in this team that somehow I did not think could be filled. If you guys remember back, it was actually Ustillo, alongside him, of course, Nifty. We knew the player Nifty could have been and the player he was showing himself as. So when he actually left the roster, it was like, whoa, how are they going to improve off of this? They drop Ustillo as well, who was there for nearly 3 years. I'm a freaking experienced player, so you think, how are they going to replace these two guys? Yes, in the scoreboard, you think it could be doable, but still, when these guys were joining, I remember covering the story as well. I said, Renegades new roster, 4th and 5th player, Lee hasn't gratisfaction. I don't know much about these guys, blah, blah, blah. Because this happens a lot, especially in the scenes where in the teams that I really don't cover too closely. You kind of just say, kind of announce the news because that's a brand new roster, and you rarely see when this does happen, right? I have announced a lot of rosters in my time so far, and when you announce these players, you have no idea who they are or where they've been before this big team. You think, okay, they're probably not going to be some star shining talent. They're not going to do much for the team to improve, because Renegades, of course, before the major had never made playoffs before, let alone the run they did, and only team to actually take a map off Astralis. I don't know what void they have filled, but throughout the past few months, they have now proven to me I did not pick them for a single stage of the major. And they have almost, in my head, I think, really proven themselves now to be a top world-class team. And again, I don't know how. From our perspective as well, we really don't know the full void of what they actually fill in the roles-wise for this team, or what missing holes they actually were able to kind of fill in and actually support themselves into. So it's been crazy to see the actual results they've had ever since this change has been made. And yeah, for that reason and that reason only, Renegades is the #1 team on my list for changes. Notable mentions out there as well could be Fnatic. Could be some other teams out there that we could be seeing changes for sometime soon. I wanted to make the video though now because this video is a long one, and I wanted to get it over with, to be honest. All right, guys, I'll be back here tomorrow with more CSGO news. I do apologize if this video is weird. I just kind of spur of the moment. I was like, you know what? I'm going to rank some teams today. So I hope you guys all enjoy. Please remember to leave your thoughts down below. I think your thoughts are way more important than mine. I just put my words out there, and sometimes you guys decide to watch them. And speaking of that, thank you for watching. I'm going to go sip some coffee. You guys should do the same. I don't know, can you even see my feet right now? The screen might be blocking my feet. This might look really weird. Okay, bye.